Views expressed on the following program do not necessarily match those of WPSL. However, we are the culprits. We're the ones that encouraged you in the first place to go ahead and share this show with all of your friends and neighbors on social networks and even next door as well, because it's time for the Sue Ellen Sanders Show with Sue Ellen Sanders.
And welcome to the show. As Cliff said, now that we're on WPSL TV as well, you could easily share the little show icon and share it on social media. And we encourage you to do that should you desire. It also makes it nice because you could listen to the show on demand.
Plus, there's a bell you can click to subscribe to WPSL TV on YouTube.
How exciting.
Then you're there instantly. Whenever you turn to YouTube, you get your choice. There will be in all your other favorites.
That's good. I like having favorites. Now, as you probably realize, we do record the show a couple days ahead of time. So you're listening to this. If you're listening to this in the car, you're listening to it on the weekend. But we actually record the show a few days before on Wednesdays. And today is the day after another school shooting, this one in Texas. And my guest, Stephanie Myers, is the Director of Health Promotion with the Department of Health in St. Lucie County. And she was not booked to talk about this because, I mean, how could we know there'd be another one? Although it's kind of scary when, it's more than scary, it's terrifying that having a school shooting incident is more the norm than the exception. And I, as somebody who spent some time working in the school system, am devastated knowing, and we all are devastated, and we don't even those of us who don't even have friends or kids in the school system now or in Texas, it's every woman and every mother and every person's nightmare. So anyhow, Steph is here with us today. Stephanie is, and we're going to start the show. We're going to get into some of the health issues that the Department of Health is dealing with and some of the programs that they have in just a few minutes. But let's talk about those stats I asked you to last minute pull for me.
Yes, this is not my area of subject matter area of expertise. So, but I did go ahead and pull some numbers locally for what some of the data looks like for us for the deaths from homicides, but also deaths from firearms in St. Lucie County. And typically with smaller numbers, and we are one county, so our numbers are not going to be huge. We look at 3-year rolling rates because it tends to give us a better idea rather than having the impact from year over year. And as I look at just even the data compared to the state of Florida, our rate of homicide by firearms for children ages 0 to 18, okay, is 4.7. Okay, and you're going, okay, well, what does that mean? That's 4.7 per 100,000, all right? And the rate for Florida is 2.2.
So our rate in St. Lucie County is double the state of Florida.
Correct. Yes. Yep.
And that, so the numbers of children age 0 through 18 who die from firearms.
In the last 3 years, when you look at the average for those last 3 years, our rate is double that for the state of Florida.
Wow.
Scary stuff.
It is scary stuff.
Very, very scary stuff.
And, overall, death by violence is the number one killer of children right now.
Yep.
Which is another scary statistic. We have spent all this time and energy eradicating diseases like chickenpox and polio and chickenpox isn't eradicated. We just have a vaccine
better
for
managed,
it. But,
managed.
Managed. Yeah, we have. And and now children in the U.S. die from violence at this extremely, incredibly high rate,
And even in St. Lucie County.
and in St. Lucie County as well.
The numbers I just talked about were for firearms, okay, for ages 0 to 18. We also have deaths from homicides in general. And our St. Lucie County rate, again, 3-year rolling rate, okay, is 5.2. And for the state of Florida, for that same period, it's 3. So we're still higher than the state average for deaths from homicide. That doesn't necessarily mean it's firearms. It could include the firearms piece, but it can be any other type of homicide.
Any other death from homicide,
Yep.
which means death from somebody else killing you.
Yes, exactly.
And many of those cases are family members or
Again,
some
you're,
of them.
you're catching me
Yeah,
at
yeah,
a
you
little
don't
off guard
have
because this
the
is not my area of
stats. Yeah, I
expertise, so
know.
I'd have to
Yeah.
do some additional drilling down on that. So I can't speak to what that breakdown looks like. Probably if Rhonda were here, she could probably do it. Rhonda Cerulli, who's also at the health department.
yes, Safe Kids Coalition.
Yes. But I think it's significant enough to say that we're twice the rate in Florida. I think that says something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that says something. And when you look at what's been week and a half, and we've had 3 shootings. Does that work? Yeah.
Nationally.
Nationally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a big influence. And we certainly have been talking, and again, not my area of expertise, but talking about the impact on mental health for adults and children throughout this whole COVID pandemic. And this is just another thing, another trauma that has to then be added into that mix. And how do we go about providing the supports that kids need, but better yet, preventing this from happening in other areas?
Well, and the prevention piece is obviously a large one, but I was a high school English teacher the year that the kids were killed at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and so we obviously picked up our drilling a lot for what to do when there was a yellow or a red alert, but the day after the shooting down there happened, you know, around 2:00, and we were starting to get the information. February 14th, and we were starting to get the information, and we had just left school, and I was following it, and then we all, students and teachers and administrators and everybody, had to go in the next day and teach school like nothing happened, and parents had to drop their kids off at school, and all around the world everything was going on as usual. And that's, you know, we're hitting the tail end of the school year for most school districts, and we're going through graduation season here.
That's right.
Of course everywhere, but the graduations in St. Lucie County are taking place this week, today, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but and some earlier in the week even. And so you've got a situation that is highly fraught with emotion. You know,
Yes.
these are the kids that died, the kids that we're hearing about, 19 children and 2 adults at this point, and there's still people that are in the hospital that
Critical
are injured.
condition, yes.
And so those numbers may continue to rise, but they were 2nd and 3rd and 4th graders. And just imagining the terror.
How do you drill with 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders to have them be prepared? Because not one of us wants them to grow up in an environment where they have to be scared all the time. But at the same time, they have to be prepared. And I think that's just a sad commentary on where we are in our world right now.
It is a very sad commentary, especially in a world where there's so many other restrictions on what teachers can teach,
Yes.
and what kids can talk about in school. but yet they're required to know and understand drills
Yeah.
in case there's an active shooter situation. So, obviously we're not going to solve it in this
No.
hour, and we can only hope that we'll start as a country moving forward in the direction we need to move forward. But 10 years ago, with the kids in Connecticut, the little kids that were shot and killed, and we were thinking, we saw pictures of kindergartners and first graders whose lives were cut short, and the parents having to deal with a situation, and there was a group that started at that time that was like, never again, never again, never again, and
Yeah.
yet there have been so many others since then. So
Yeah.
anyhow, the kids have to deal with the mental anguish, the
parents.
parents, the fallout, and
Yeah.
not just the kids who and the families of the children who died, on the friends that saw it,
Yes.
and the family members in Texas, but the second and third and fourth graders here in Florida or wherever,
Yes.
who are, despite their family's best interests, seeing some of the footage
Yep.
on TV or on the computer.
It's really interesting because we talk, I mean, social media has really changed the way our world is, and digital news and those kinds of things. But there's been a lot of discussion around the fact that we're almost traumatizing our kids because they're able to watch some of these things happen. Whereas back in, not that I'm dating us, but back in your and my, when we were in school, it wasn't plastered all over everything. We didn't see it in our faces on social media.
Right, you could just turn off the 6 o'clock
Yes.
news before something like
Exactly.
that happened.
Yes.
And it wasn't every night. There's sometimes where we're watching the news and it's almost like the first 5 stories are all about unspeakable tragedies.
Yeah.
Not just school shootings, but many other things that are going on. And as a journalist and a former newspaper journalist too, I have defended the profession against the saying, if it bleeds, it leads. But the fact of the matter is that people watch that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so if that information is out there, then it's going to be publicized and it's going to be watched.
Yeah.
And as you said, now with social media, with the fact that people can check on social media, even with the Marjorie Stoneman Davis, the kids were live
Yes.
tweeting while it was happening, and that's how people first
Learned
heard
about it.
about it. But also, even little kids and teachers and family members, everybody's got a cell phone where they could take
Yeah.
a snippet of this, a snippet of that. I'm sure as time unfolds, we're going to hear about the young man who was the shooter. And we're going to hear that some type of social media platform, he
sure.
posted some type of manifesto or something of that. We're already seeing evidence that he messaged somebody by Instagram and sent pictures of his guns.
Yeah.
So it's a very scary world we live in, and
It is.
the options are not, you can't just give up, you can't just stay inside your house, you can't just not go anywhere. But when it's dangerous to go to the grocery store and to school,
Right.
even elementary school, or to church or any of the other places, to an outdoor concert, it really, you've got to have that balance, and have to,
And I think you're hitting on something that does play directly into health, and that is, how do you manage the upstream? So how do we look at how we can prevent these things from happening in the future, but then also how do you manage the downstream? What resources need to be available to help people cope with this? What can we do preventively, and then what can we do to help people recover more quickly? And I think, if nothing, in the last 2-3 years, we've learned that it has to be an integral part of health, the mental health, the wellness focus, the how do we find this balance? How do we not stay locked in our homes because we're afraid of what's going on out there? And there are no easy answers to that, but it's just something to add to the conversation.
And it's interesting because as I get older, I understand that it's not how you act and react when things are going well that is the true measure of a person, but it's how you react and how you handle things when they're not going well.
Resiliency, that's that magic word.
That is.
How do we take care of ourselves to the point where, and our kids, to the point where they can be resilient even in the face of situations like this?
So what can we do if you're your parent or grandparent listening and your kid is coming to you? I know that you don't deal in mental health, but what kind of programs are out there for kids and for families?
And that's actually a great question, and I know that the community is working to look at what are those options that are available. As you know, the roundtable is very pivotal in looking at the challenges that kids face and where are the gaps and how can we work to fill those gaps. So they're coming into their strategic planning process, and I know that this is something that they're going to be looking at, is doing what are our current assets, what are the resources that currently we have, and I don't have the 360-degree picture on all this, but I know that we have programs through Tykes and Teens. New Horizons has some things. We have Henderson Behavioral Health. I'm going to miss somebody. We have Suncoast, mental health facility, and I'm sure there's lots and lots of others that are working. But I think we can all safely say that it's probably not enough. There's never enough.
It's never enough.
It's never enough. And I know that there are waiting lists, and I know that it can be a real struggle for people to get in a timely manner to get their needs met. The schools, I know, have stepped up and have been trying to fill in some of those gaps until they can get kids into professionals to be able to assist them. So I think it's going to be a matter of looking at where we are currently and then looking at how we can fill those gaps and maybe find ways to better serve our kids.
So some of the places that people can reach out to, anywhere from the 411 services.
211? Yeah.
211, sorry.
It's all right.
411 didn't sound exactly right.
But I had your back. It's okay,
but as overall information, but some of the United Way agencies, the Children's Services Council, a lot of the groups that they fund, so you can look at on their website at the groups they fund. As you mentioned, St. Lucie County, the Roundtable of St. Lucie County, and the Roundtable actually is an organization that's made up not just of the different funding organizations like Children's Services Council and United Way, but also of the law enforcement agencies and the Justice Department and people who deal.
And the schools.
And
I mean, I think they're
and the health department.
Yeah, the health department. I think there are upwards of like 35 different key leaders in the community who come to the table to look at things from the big picture perspective, but also to bring resources to the table when gaps are identified. How do we go about filling these gaps?
And just so you know, if you're listening to this, Stephanie and I both know it's actually a square table.
Yes, it is a square table. Yes.
But round table sounds
it was the catch term when it was being founded.
It was. And round table, of course, also refers not just to the table that these people sit around, but to the fact that they are all sharing the information with each other and coming up with, as you said, they're getting ready to do their, is it something they do annually?
It's actually a 5-year strategic plan.
Okay.
So where they go in and they look at what is the current data, what are the resources we have included in that data, and we also look at what are the evidence-based best practices that are out there. Where are the gaps? Because sometimes we have great programs, but we have identified gaps in some of the services that are there. And we usually have a really comprehensive group. I will tell you that one of the committees that I'm going to be heading up here is the Healthiest Weight Subcommittee. So looking at healthiest weight for our kids. We know that obesity is a growing challenge and concern. So we're going to try and bring together the minds, the great brain trust that we have in this community to look at where are those gaps? What are some strategies we might be able to try? And then how do we identify funding sources? Do we have enough providers out there to be able to make these things happen? But all of that is then presented to the roundtable, steering their group, and then they start to identify where they want their strategic priorities to be for the next 5 years.
What an excellent segue there.
Do you like that? Do you
Yeah.
like that? It was
But-
even unplanned.
And you know, although anything is on the table, on our square table here,
Yes.
our rectangle here, to talk about, one of the things we're not particularly going to gear on today is actually COVID, other than to just acknowledge that, yeah, the numbers are trending up again. So if you're due for a booster, you should go ahead and get it. If you haven't been vaccinated yet, oh my gosh, why not? Then
just be aware.
just be aware the numbers are trending
Just be
again.
aware and do what you feel is best to protect yourself and your families.
Yep. Wash your hands, wear a face mask when you're in a crowded situation. Maybe don't go around shaking hands with everybody you meet. Maybe stay out of big crowd situations if you're uncomfortable, or if your health is in any way
Potentially put you at greater risk.
Yeah, put
Yeah.
you. But the reason that I do bring up COVID is because we're talking about weight,
Yes.
and I would say so many people I know. I would say 90% of people I know experience some type of weight gain over these COVID years, even though a lot of them are, now that, I kind of feel like we're the munchkins from the Wizard of Oz coming out from
Yes.
underneath the. Is the witch dead?
The isolation. I like that. That's a great analogy.
And that's how I picture it. And so, there was a double whammy. We ate because we were home and we were close to the refrigerator,
Yes.
or the gyms were closed. Some of the opportunities, if you were a runner, there weren't a lot of sporting events. If you were a soccer player or baseball player or
Kids weren't
yeah,
at school,
yeah.
so they were doing the whole virtual thing as well. So they weren't getting any activity. So that certainly has contributed to them as well. So
And while they were, doing their work virtually online, there was no point where somebody was saying, okay, now go run around the backyard, because now it's that time that you're going to walk around. Just even the act of walking to a bus stop, walking home from the bus
Exactly.
stop, walking to the cafeteria, walking back, at least it was some type of physical activity. And then there's the whole thought process of we eat comfort foods when we need to
comfort.
be comfort. Yes,
Yes,
and that's
exactly.
like all those white foods, or beige also, fits right in, and ice cream fits into that as well. So we are climbing out of that.
and I think there definitely has been an increase. We don't have data is always a little bit further behind to look at what's happening with those numbers. I
But
know-
just anecdotally.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You thought health department, we got to be evidence based, and you look at all the
I
data. You know how that
understand,
works.
but
Okay.
I'm not with
I
the
know.
health department. I can just
you
make up
you
the
can,
facts.
You can.
I can just tell you that everyone I talk to
Yes.
has said, "Oh my gosh, I've got to lose this COVID weight."
Yes, and depending on who they are, it's either the COVID-15, the COVID-20, the COVID-19.
Or the COVID-5.
The COVID-5, yes.
Or
exactly.
maybe they didn't gain any weight at all, but they've just lost muscle tone from not moving
Right.
around. So we're out there, we're moving around again, and of course, it feels like it's the middle of the summer already.
Yes.
So it's really hot and humid for being outside and for being physically active.
Yeah.
But it's still a good thing to do. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the health department.
Okay.
And the direction you're going, and then we're also going to talk tangentially about diabetes
Yes.
and diabetes prevention.
I love it.
So we got plenty of positive
We do.
things to talk about,
And some exciting things that are happening.
okay.
They're coming down that way.
So like what?
Like what? Well, first let me start you with some data because, I've already
Okay.
beaten that one to death.
Yeah.
but- okay. Some of the most recent data that we have talks about our children. So our Women, Infant, and Children's program, the WIC program, showed that clients aged 0 to 2 years from 2017 to 2021, we have a higher number of children who are obese, okay? So when we look at, and St. Lucie County's proportion exceeds the state proportion.
And that's been trending for a really long
Yes.
time.
Yeah, and I know that we can't show everybody the graph here, but that's kind of the graph that we're looking at here. And it talks about St. Lucie County's proportion rose to 20% of the WIC clients that were being served are obese, compared to Florida, which was 16.7%.
So at least we're not double, but we're higher.
But we're higher,
than the
yes,
state.
and it's trending up for both the state
For-
and for the county levels. What I would love to see, but I know that we don't have available at this point, is what does that data look like from the demographic perspective?
Mm-hmm. The breakdown demographically.
The breakdown demographically, just to look at, we know that, okay, this is a trend, but where are our pockets where it's the worst, and then starting to look at those pieces as well.
Gotcha.
One of the things that we're working on right now, we were fortunate to have gotten some funding from the state to move forward with a health equity plan development. And so we're looking at what are those health disparities that exist. We know that there are certain factors that influence health and quality of life, including education levels, where people live, access to transportation, all of those different components. So looking at all these pieces and being able to then focus in on what we as a community are going to work towards. Well, it just so happens that the Health Equity Task Force has identified obesity as their target area of disparity, and that's what the work plan is going to be focusing in on for the next 2 to 3 years. It's just now being written.
Okay.
We hope to have it, we'll be ready to go out and present on it in July. That's the goal at this point.
So ready to present very shortly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the goal. And then being able to start some of these conversations as to, what are the projects that we think the community can take on to help address obesity, not just in kids, but also in adults as we move forward.
And, just again, anecdotally, fast food and the whole growth sector of fast food is starting to come full circle as some of the more popular fast food restaurants are realizing that you don't really have to charge twice as much for the healthy option.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah.
back in the day, there's, places like McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's, and I don't really want to leave anybody out, but they all offered salad options, but their salad options had things in them that made them not so healthy.
Yes.
And B, there was a heck of an upcharge. You could get none of those salad options were on the dollar menu. Let's just say that.
There you go. That's fair.
So it was almost encouraging people, if you didn't have a lot of money, you had to eat unhealthily.
Yes. And I think healthy food is more expensive, just in general. Okay.
Yep.
Well,
Certainly organic is more
Yes,
expensive.
definitely. And a lot of families that are out there that are unlimited incomes, they're struggling to make sure their kids get enough food in their tummies. And we rely really heavily on the school district for some of the, the breakfast free and reduced lunch programs. A lot of kids, that's their 2 primary meals for the day. They may not have anything else when they get home. So, fast food is a factor, but I think it's also access to healthy choices The big focus that they look at when it comes to how do we change this obesity crisis, how do we impact it, is making the healthy choice the easy choice.
And as you said, part of it is availability, but part of it also is education.
Exactly.
Because no matter how old you are, you still may not understand the whole nutrition.
I think there's an even bigger piece than that, and I don't want to draw an analogy between tobacco and food choices, but there is, if you think about the culture, what do we grow up with? What influences us from day one all the way through that impacts our eating habits, okay? My boss used to talk about how she had her first cigarette at 8, and it was with a family member who shared it with her. They had, at schools, they had smoking sections. It was an approved thing, and it was in all the movies. It was in the sitcoms. It was advertising was everywhere.
My kids just can't even get around the fact that, because they don't remember that there were smoking sections in restaurants. And I remember one of my most famous quotes that I wrote in a past column that I really liked was that a smoking section in a restaurant is the same as having a peeing section in the pool.
I like that. That's very good.
Cliff, it says peeing is allowed. You're allowed to say that on the air.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah, but I mean, it's a very visual thought.
So when you look at those pieces and you start thinking about our culture,
she's bringing us back.
I'm bringing us right back to where this cultural norm is, and that in order for us to really have an impact on this, we have to change the cultural norms.
Right.
And Jen was in a meeting, and she said, somebody said to her, well, it's too late for us old folks. We got to start with the kids. And her response back was, no.
It's
never too late.
Yeah.
It's never too late. We all have power and the ability to make different choices so that we can impact our health. But the point was very valid, is that we do need to look at our kids. What are they seeing as the norm? What is acceptable? Is fast food the norm? Because we are so busy now, and that's the easier choice I'm too tired to go and do food prep, So is part of that education we just talked about, is that helping people understand how they can do healthy food prep without it having to take so much time, just a little bit of planning involved.
And my daughter was telling me at her spin gym up in the D.C. area, they had a nutrition class, and the nutritionist came in and she was talking to them about the clean 10 and the dirty 15. I don't remember exactly what the numbers were, but the idea was what things you should definitely spend the extra money for to buy organic. Because, as you know, like, for example, something like blueberries, you might literally spend twice the amount for the organic blueberry pack of blueberries, because you don't buy them one at a time.
Of course.
But there's other things like bananas where you don't need to spend that extra money because you're taking the peel off before you eat it. So that's the difference between the dirty and the clean and the organic. So anyhow, that was my
well, you used great examples of healthy choices.
Yeah.
There's a whole program that we are working on with pediatricians in the community, and also, I shouldn't say we, it's Cleveland Clinic is really focused in on some of that pediatrician education, but the school nurses also have. It's the 5210 program. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
5210 is a class it's a curriculum that's taught to the kids in 3rd grade, okay? And 5 is 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. 2 is no more than 2 hours of recreational screen time, okay? 1 is at least 1 hour of physical activity per day. Most of the kids, it's playtime. That's enough for them, right? And then 0 sugary drinks or tobacco. So 5210 is sort of one of those best practice curriculums out there.
0 sugar?
Yes, ma'am. Rethink your drink is a whole another component that talks about water.
Okay. And
water.
And water is really important, and there's so many different types of flavored waters out
Yes.
there anymore that have no sugar or no other additives except for like a little bit of a fruit flavor. But you can also just take a bottle of water and squeeze a little bit of
you
lemon
can,
or lime.
Oh,
in
you can
it.
put cucumber in it. You can put strawberries in it. Anything that gives that a little bit of a flavor to it, but without the added sugar, because the
Yeah.
added sugar is really what contributes. Oftentimes, we're not aware of how much sugar
Mm-hmm.
is in some of these things.
And you know, that's something you do develop the taste for,
Yes.
or you develop a taste where you don't want it anymore, you don't crave it anymore, depending on, like for example, my caffeine of choice in the morning used to be, and I know this is even worse, a Diet Coke.
Uh-huh.
So not only, you know, what was I drinking, and then sometimes I needed the high test, the
Yes.
regular Coke.
Little caffeine.
Yeah.
Or sugar, yes. In this
Yeah,
case.
so the sugar and the caffeine, but also the artificial sugars too,
Yep.
you know, create all types of stomach upsets or
Oh, there's all kinds of research out there that goes into more detail on that. But I think the key with it is that we don't stay hydrated enough. And we know that one of the ways to help people lose weight, whether that be child or adult, is to drink more fluids.
The other thing that's interesting too is that I really think even some adults don't understand that sometimes when you're really thirsty, it manifests itself and you think you're hungry
Sure.
instead. And so you might open the refrigerator and eat 5 different things or a few bites of 5 different things. And none of them will make you happy because really
Your body wants water.
Yeah, yeah.
It wants water. It is interesting though. People say, "Oh, I don't like water," and I'm like, "So let's add something to that water. Let's add something healthy." You know, you talked about lemons, strawberries, cucumbers. If Emily were here, she's our health educator. She could probably rattle off a bunch more. But simple things that add the flavor without adding all the additional extra sugars to it makes a big difference.
So she knows more. That's because the ones I know are lemon, lime, strawberries, cucumbers,
Oh, I've seen people put peaches in it.
peaches.
Peaches
Ooh.
in it. Nectarines.
Yeah, so you could really put just about any type
Yep.
of fruit. Not bananas. That just doesn't seem like that would be a good fit.
I'm
They'd
sure
get
you
all-
could. I'm just
But
not.
they'd get all mushy.
Yeah,
and that wouldn't be
it doesn't sound very
attractive.
appealing
Yeah.
to me. But anyway,
Yeah.
what do we know?
So yeah.
But yes,
But water.
So 5210 is a real
Yeah.
simple strategy, and it doesn't change when you're a kid to an adult. You still want to get 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. Okay. If you can manage your recreational screen time, it probably means you're doing other things in your life that are going to help you
Instead.
increase your physical activity.
Yeah.
It's going to increase your social connectedness because you're more likely to be out interacting with other people. And then with the then 0 for the sugary drinks, and all those factors are simple strategies. If we can get the kids educated on that, and then also have it reinforced, the pediatricians out there doing that. Let's have parents certainly know about it. You know, as after school programs, that was one of the big conversations that came up. Is, you know, what we know that the schools are working really hard to provide healthy meals for the kids. What's happening at the after school programs? And one of the new things that we're probably going to run out of time before I can even get to all of this, but is we're looking at working with the early childhood education centers to look at what are they doing, what are the programs that they have in place to ensure that we set that cultural norm for kids from as young as we can get them, so that we don't end up with huge levels of diabetes as kids get older.
And of course, some of the cheapest drinks that you can make in bulk to give little kids are loaded with sugar.
Absolutely. Yep.
And if instead the kids from an early age were drinking water or
Yep.
water-based drinks
Yep.
instead, then they wouldn't miss it.
Correct. Yep. It does make a huge difference in there.
I remember too with the kids with the sports teams, especially when they were a lot younger. The parents would take turns bringing snacks, and they'd bring those really sugary drinks to have the kids have, which weren't particularly great to have, and even things that are the high sugar sports drinks aren't necessarily something. If your kid is playing a high level of activity and running back and forth across the field for 2 hours, then they might need a sports drink. But if they're just outside running for 15 or 20 minutes, then water is probably just fine.
And even with their sports drinks, the things that are in there are helpful when you're sweating a lot and doing all that. But there's also a lot of sugar in them typically. We don't call it anybody, but yeah.
There's so many healthier alternatives out there now, and I'm glad to see that the manufacturers are coming up with some of these things, and where they're not filled with artificial sweeteners, but they're just they provide the boost you need and vitamins you need and the hydration you need without necessarily providing a whole level of sugar too.
One of the other pieces I think that also impacts, and I'm guilty as charged, is that portion sizes. What does it mean to have 5 servings of fruits and vegetables? What does that look like? What is considered a serving size? So you could have a plum. It's smaller than the size of a baseball. That's considered 1 serving size. If you eat a big apple, that's 2 serving sizes. So you can really easily fit those in. One of the other things that we've learned is that parents, you can sneak vegetables in that your kids aren't even going to be aware of. I actually did a whole activity at an event doing fruit smoothies, okay? Well, you could throw some kale into that. You could throw some spinach into that. Kids don't really notice it. It's a little green, okay, depending on which fruit you use. But it's an easy way to get that extra vegetables serving into them. And who doesn't like a fruit smoothie, a fruit and vegetable smoothie now?
There's vegetables that you can put in that won't color your drink green. So
yes,
you might consider using some of those, like carrots or something else that because sometimes even with us adults, when you look at a drink and it's an ugly color, like
I look at some of these juicing things that these guys that come out like really green. I'm like,
gross is that?
What is that?
Plus,
it's
not like it's an attractive green.
No.
It's usually that yellowy green that is just like ooh.
Well, we all know that food appearance does impact us.
But we do know that.
But if the content of our food is healthier, then hopefully we're going to start reducing some of the obesity that exists in our community.
So just to be straight, in the 5210, you're not talking about 0 sugars in general.
Zero sugary drinks.
Okay.
Sugary drinks.
I'll take that.
Okay. Phew.
But we're also you may have grown up in this time period too, but I grew up in a time period where there was Jell-O for dessert every night.
Absolutely.
And it was not sugar-free Jell-O.
No. And sometimes it even had whipped cream on it. Yeah.
And so, we've kind of moved a little bit away from that dessert culture.
There's nothing better for dessert than fruit.
Yes. So the knowledge of understanding. My son has started caramelizing some of the fruit.
Oh.
So you could just add a tad of brown sugar and then cook it like a banana or some other type of fruit, and it creates that sweet, yummy, and then
the taste. You get the little taste of it. That makes a difference.
So,
Love it.
so let's talk about the correlation between obesity and diabetes and what you're doing. We got about 10 more minutes.
Okay. We have, we focus a lot on diabetes management. But one of the programs that we've actually, at least nationwide, they're finding to be very effective is looking at pre-diabetes education. So if somebody's at risk for diabetes, okay, one of my risk factors is that my dad is diabetic, okay? So, and people who are heavier or who have other underlying health conditions that may impact that, they actually have the ability to make some different choices in their lives, change their lifestyle habits, and it will avoid becoming diabetic. So one of the programs we're working on now, we actually had a pilot program that we'll be finishing up this fall, is a diabetes prevention program. And people cannot be diabetic, they have to be pre-diabetic. But they go through a year-long process, and everybody goes, a year? It's not every day. But the idea is to establish some other healthy choices, to develop a support system. But as you work through this process, you greatly reduce your risk of becoming diabetic. Now, the good news is, for all of us who are working jobs and it's like, I can't come to a meeting, even once a month, whatever, then we're going to be doing an online platform. It's called HALT, okay? And we're just getting halt, okay?
Yeah.
And you're going to ask me what HALT means, and I'm not going to remember off the top of my head.
That's okay.
But
We'll remember.
Anyway.
Healthy?
But it's a diabetes prevention program that
Okay.
will be done virtually.
Okay.
And staff will be, serving as the lifestyle coaches for that program. But it's going to allow us, we hope, to be able to serve more people in the community, because we have got huge numbers of people who are diabetic or pre-diabetic in our community, and we have the ability. It's a fixable challenge. It's something that we can change and we can modify through our behaviors.
Is that affected by demographics?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I will tell you that, let's see if I can remember the numbers off the top of my head. I believe that,
Lots.
yeah, it's people of color are 2.5 times more likely to develop diabetes than their white counterparts, just in general. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It will be a whole nother call on social determinants of health. But we know that we need to be focusing in on those areas so that we can reduce the cost of care for somebody who's diabetic. Is huge. And so if we can start changing some of those norms and changing the way this develops, not only are we going to reduce our costs across the board for healthcare, but these people are going to live longer, healthier lives. We're going to be able to stay. The older I get, the more and more I recognize the need to be able to age in place, stay where I am, do it as effectively as I can for as long as I can. And by managing some of that symptomology, we're going to be able to be more healthy long term and be able to stay where we want to be as we get older.
And preventing disease is almost always cheaper than treating
absolutely.
it
Absolutely
once
it
you've
is.
got it.
Yep.
So what are the underlying causes of diabetes and the factors that contribute?
The big factors
Yeah.
that contribute are age.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So the older you
So
are,
the older-
the more likely
Okay.
you can. Gender. Okay. We have race, of course. Family history of type 2 diabetes is another factor. Our weight and our physical activity levels. The other thing we find is that people who have had gestational diabetes when they were having their
I was
children,
going to ask you
yes,
about that.
increases their risk.
It does, because
does
I had
increase their risk.
gestational diabetes with
Ah.
both my children.
I didn't know that. Okay, yeah.
What are do you know offhand what some of the symptoms are that people should watch for if they, for example, had gestational diabetes? Because a lot of times that may have been 20, 25, 30, 27 years ago.
Well, I'll tell you that one of the best screening tools we have now to see if somebody's pre-diabetic is the either fasting blood glucose level or what they call the A1C, which is an average estimate for 3 months of your blood sugar levels. And that's going to give you your best idea of where do I fall. If your numbers are creeping up, then you may be at risk for that. We actually have a whole survey questions that we ask that talk about some of these factors we just talked about. What is your age? Do you have a family history? How much physical activity do you get? And that's going to allow you to be able to evaluate that. And then, if you meet that criteria, then you're eligible for the class. And we will work with you to try and figure out how to make best fit into your life so that it can be something that you are able to do and do successfully.
So, say that you fit all of that criteria or some of that criteria, but you feel perfectly fine. Does that mean that you're okay, or?
If you are at greater risk for developing it, you may not even be aware. 1 out of every 3 people who are pre-diabetic are identified, know that they are pre-diabetic. The other 2 out of those 3 don't have any idea
They don't.
that they're pre-diabetic, no.
So on the other side of it, are there symptoms that you can look for that might push you to get a screen?
Now, you're going to ask me who
I don't
doesn't.
know.
I don't
Yeah.
teach the program or any of that.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that it's a hidden
Yeah.
It's a hidden challenge. There may not be any active symptoms, but that's why we're trying to get people to
Until it's
check
too
until
late,
you're
yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
it's not even too late. I mean, if you get somebody
Yeah.
who becomes type 2 diabetic, oftentimes there are things they can do to change it. Okay. My dad every day, he's a doctor, right? So he says to me every day, if I could stop eating sugar, he said, I could probably lose some weight. I think I wouldn't have to be on medication for my diabetes. Okay. So he even knows at 83, okay, that there's just simple changes that he can make. But we're much better off trying to hit it early because of when you get to that diabetic stage, there's so many potential long-term impacts of that. You're talking about neuropathy in your hands and your feet. You have potentially, if you get a wound, healing is an issue. Not being able to see because of diabetic retinopathy. There's just all kinds of pieces. Increases in heart disease. That if we can catch this stuff early enough and teach people how to do things differently, boom, and they can and make it easy for them. Remember, making the healthy choice the easy choice is what will help facilitate them being able to make those lifestyle changes.
Well, we just have a couple minutes left. So let's wrap up our discussion and tell people how they can get some of this information on your website or through your social media channels.
And actually, it's funny because Jen is actually working to update some of our St. Lucie County website pages to make sure that information is accurate.
And Jen is Jennifer
Harris, yes.
Yes, she is the Public Information Officer for
Florida
the Department of Health.
Yes. And so if they just call the office, okay, and I'm going to give them my number because I can't remember Emily's off the top of my head, but it's 772-873-4923. Just leave a message indicating that you are interested in finding out if you're pre-diabetic and maybe interested in some of the programs that are available. Leave me a message and I will be happy to get you hooked up with the right person so we can see about, checking it out and seeing what we can do to help.
And meanwhile, if you do want to find out what other types of programs are the Department of Health offers, you can go on their website.
Yes, it's St. Lucie, no period, so stlucie.floridahealth.gov.
Okay.
And that will get them right to our local website pages. And then there's information there under programs and services. We've got so many wonderful programs that are out there, from WIC to maternal child health programs. We have clinics that help with family planning. We have adult and child dental programs. There's so many things that are out there that we're working towards.
And of course, you can still get things like vaccinations through the health department as well.
That's the backbone of what we do, yes.
Yeah. And if you haven't been to the Department of Health office off Midway Road, it's really easy to get in and to get the help you need, and you can pick up brochures and information.
And we're doing COVID vaccinations there every day.
Every day.
Between 8 and 5. So if people want to come over and get a booster, they're more than welcome to do that. We would love to have them. It's 5150 Northwest Milner Drive.
Okay. That's right across from the fire district, if you know where that is.
Right next to. Yes, they're 5160.
Yes. Stephanie Myers has been my guest, and she is the Director of Health Promotions for the Florida Department of Health in St. Lucie County. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Giving me time to talk.
Yeah, we'll have you come back and talk some more maybe at the end of the summer. Thanks for listening today. Have a great week. We'll